Hi, we're Team 3, and we had to create a program that would calculate the roots using the quadratic formula. To do this, we first researched the quadratic equation and the quadratic formula to find out what variables that we would have to prompt the user for. Then next, we had to create a code that would execute every component of the quadratic formula using these variables given, while taking into consideration that there could not be a real solution. So to do this, we had to implement an if statement, which would check that a didn't equal 0 and there wasn't a negative under the radical, which would lead to no real solutions. And if those went through, the else statement would run through the complete program and give you the roots of the quadratic formula.
Here we have the basic quadratic equation, which could also be used as the formula for a parabola. And sometimes when factoring the quadratic doesn't work and you can't solve for x, this is when the quadratic formula right here comes into play, which is derived from the process of completing the square, and it allows you to solve for x by implementing the components of a, b, and c into this equation right here. And now Genghis will talk about the coding of this equation.
To start off a Java program, we follow a very basic format, and since we're using a scanner, we do import java.util.scanner, which we end up closing towards the end of the program. Java has a very basic format as far as how to program. We go with the public class, public static void, and then since we're doing a scanner console, which allows us to enter in our own variables and produces its own outputs, we use a scanner console, which is scanner console equals new scanner system.in.
Alright, so right here is when we declare the variables. We declare as a double because it could have decimal places, not just an integer. So a, which is like over here in the formula, which is under the radical, b, outside the radical, c, also under the radical, and under the radical is explained right over here, which is b times b minus 4a times c. And then x plus and x minus is right over here, basically their difference by a plus and a minus sign. And then here we prompt the user to enter the a value, prompt the user to enter the b value, and prompt the user to enter the c value.
So in this part of the code, we actually start to implement some of the quadratic formula and start to have the code start to print out what we want it to show. So up top in this first line here, where it says under the radical equals b times b, which would be the same as b squared minus 4ac, which is the equation under the radical in the quadratic formula. The next one, I'm initializing the variables of x plus and x minus that I declared up top, to initializing them to the equation, which would give you the two types of roots you can get, which is when the quadratic formula says negative b plus or minus, the plus goes with, of course, the negative b plus, and the x minus goes with the negative b minus, just differentiating to get those two different roots. And then it puts out the equation, and the difference between the two is just that here's the plus and here's the minus. The next line starts the if statements and starts the constraints with the quadratic formula. So if a is equal to 0 in the quadratic formula, the a that you will plug in, it will print out no real solutions. And also if anything under the radical is negative or less than 0, then I'll also have no real solutions. So if that happens, then it prints out no real solutions. Otherwise, or else, the system will go on to what it should be doing, and that's the roots equal, and it'll print out the answers you get for these equations up here for x plus and x minus, and it'll print them out here, rounding them to 2 decimal places. And then down here, you close the console saying you're done having the scanner console, having anything in it, with your ending closed console, and then the ending braces for the program here.